Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode here with Briggs Motorsports. And today's content is going to consist of, once again, our Project RX-7 here and the rebuild that we have going on for the 13B. And as you guys know, I did give you guys a step-by-step tutorial in the last video of how to tear down your 13B to prep it for rebuild. And as you guys can see, I'm ready to go. I have my gloves on. So today I'm going to be showing you how to disassemble your 13B rotary engine. So as you know from the last video, we did have a bunch of debris sitting on top of the motor from when we tore it down. So I took the liberty before we started today's video to clean it up, get some of the leaves off, so that way we do have a fresh slate for the disassembly. And what today's content is really going to consist of today is us finally cracking open the 13B rotary engine. So guys, let's get started. So how we're going to get started is we are going to start by taking the clutch off, and how we're going to do that is there's six bolts that go around that attach to the flywheel here. And the reason why we're taking the clutch off here is because there's a huge 54mm nut that sits behind there that's torqued like crazy from the factory, and we're going to have to loosen that nut up and take it off to gain access to the rest of the motor. So let's start by doing that. And we were able to get the clutch out. Looks like the last owner did a good job by changing out the clutch, but it looks like she was going to go soon, so we're going to add that to our list on the rebuild here. I also got the pressure plate out as well. Still looks good. So and next, what we're going to be doing is, let's see, so we're going to be locking down the flywheel, and I'll be showing you guys how to do that. Might have a trick up my sleeve to show you guys here, but we're going to be locking down the flywheel, taking the nut off the front, and we're also going to be taking off this nut here. And I'm going to be doing some explaining about this here, because that is literally the hardest thing to take off when rebuilding this motor. So let me get started. So actually I changed my mind. First order of business is going to be taking these pulleys off here, and they're held on by 4 bolts. So that way we have complete access to this front nut, and we're actually going to try to crack this one first before we try to loosen up the one in the back. So how you take these off is these 4 nuts, and it's going to be a 10mm socket. And next, after we get the pulley off, the pulley assembly here off in the front, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these sensors off. The reason why is because these monitor the eccentric shaft sensor, almost like your timing sensors. So we're going to get these off here so that way I don't break them or mess them up, and if I do, I'll just replace them, but I'd rather save money. So I believe these are two 10mm nuts as well, just to pull these off, and you'll have full access to this front plate here. So let's get started on that. And just like that, sensors are removed. So now this is going to be the moment of truth to see if my trick worked as far as this nut is concerned here in the front. And what I did for let's see, the flywheel here in the back is what I did is I took one of the arms that actually come with this engine stand, and I was able to take one of the transmission bolts, one of the transmission bolts and one of the nuts up here, which fit into the flywheel there, just to try to lock it down so that way it doesn't move. Has a little bit of wiggle room there, let's hope not too much, but I believe it will do the trick. So let's try to get that front nut off first, and then we'll attempt to get the big one back here. So with these front nuts, or the front nut and the rear nut, had to break out the heavy artillery. I'm just gonna hook up my air impact wrench here instead of using my electric one, just to get a little bit more torque on the nuts themselves, to give me a little bit more leverage, and that way I'm not fooling around with this thing all night. So with the flywheel locked in place, I already sprayed some WD-40, as you guys can see, just to try to get some extra lubrication in there, just get it undone. So with the flywheel locked, with our air impact, now let's cross our fingers and hope this gets the job done. So just an update on that. That didn't work out as expected. Air impact did little to no damage. Didn't even move the nut one bit. I actually had to put in a little bit of elbow grease and a whole lot of leverage into this. As you can see, I do have my jack bar in the back and my handy dandy socket wrench here, along with that deep wall 19. What I was able to do was I was able to keep the rear locked down. Use the wrench to my benefit here and get some leverage in there, guys. If you are a do-it-yourself guy, or if you have any kind of mechanic skills about you, you do know that old school trick there. Just gave you a little bit more leverage. It is loose, guys. We did get it off, or not completely off, but we're actually going to leave that on and wish for the best on the back going forward. Because I mean, this is torqued down way less than this rear one. And actually, I don't know if you guys can see, I'm going to have to go and get a new one, is the transmission bolt is now bent. So I'm hoping I don't do any kind of bending on this rear one. I actually switched the location. It was down at the bottom. I had to switch it to the top just for that reason. I don't want to risk anything, any damage to the flywheel or anything like that, if I do decide to reuse this flywheel. But yeah, so got the front off. Now we got to get the rear. So I'm gonna cross my fingers and toes on that one. All right, let's get to work. So guys, just a little tidbit how we were actually able to get this rear nut loosened is went on ahead and took the air impact, hooked it up to the compressor. I tried my electric impact. It did not work. I'm not gonna say it didn't work. It just didn't do the job. But what I did is I took my air impact. I bought an adapter from AutoZone from a 1/2 to a 3/4 adapter, which fit right here in the back. And as you guys can see, this thing is loose. So pretty proud of myself. So guys, that's a trick you guys can use. Just kind of Jimmy rigged it here. You do have these pins on the flywheel to which you can attach your trusty arm from your engine stand if you choose, and also the large, I would say, transmission bolt. I will be needing to replace mine as mine is bent, but it is a nifty trick if you guys do not have the flywheel stopper. I believe a couple RX-7 stores online do sell a flywheel stopper that bolts right up here to the top, has about 3 to 5 teeth on it, fit into the grooves on the flywheel here, and that would work a lot better. I just didn't have the time, and I was in kind of a bind with this week's video, and I figured, you know what the heck, let's try it. And guys, it worked out. So hopefully you guys are able to use that, and we're gonna continue with the rest of the disassembly here. And guys, I just made the biggest mess ever. So I tilted over the engine. I didn't drop it on the floor or nothing, but just turned it on the engine stand here, and my God, was there a bunch of coolant and oil still in there. So I think with that next, I'm gonna leave the flywheel on for the moment. I'm gonna leave the front cover on for the moment. I'm gonna take the oil pan off next, so that way no more mess. So let's get going on that. So guys, now we've gotten the oil pan taken off, which made a big mess down there, and we got a bunch of almost like gasket sealant going around the gasket itself, and it got actually into the oil pickup tube, which I'm not too happy about, but we'll be replacing that as well. And next we're going to flip this motor back over, let the rest of the oil drain out, and we're actually going to pull apart the pull out the flywheel there, and then we'll be able to pull the front cover off and start working on the front there. Also, my buddy Nick came in with his Mitsubishi Galant over there, doing some fine tuning. Say hello, Nick.
What's up?
There we go.
Who's sitting on Instagram?
Yes, sir. So, guys, I think I'm gonna call it a night. My buddy Nick came through. We actually talked a lot of things over about getting this motor dialed in, but just where we left off, we have the oil pan off, the oil pickup tube off. We actually got the front nut there off, and tomorrow we're gonna come back. We're gonna get the flywheel off, and we're also gonna get the front cover off, so that way we can actually get into this motor, get it torn down, and then we'll see what she's got going on inside. And now that I've come this far, honestly think this whole time we've had a fuel issue. Could have been, I mean, anything from the ECU acting up to the injectors being clogged just because it's been sit for so long. I don't know, but we're gonna go with a fresh motor, fresh start, so that way we're fresh, ready to go once we get the turbo manifold, once we get all the upgrades going. So once again, I'm gonna call it a night. I'll see you guys in the morning. What's going on, guys? Made it back in a little later in the day than I wanted to start, but hey, we're back here just to pick up where we left off. Just got the oil pan off, so now we're gonna start by getting the flywheel and as well as the front cover off here. So let's get started. So once again, with the removal of the flywheel here, we're gonna leave this nut on. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a rubber mallet here and bang around the face of the flywheel. Stay away from the teeth, so that way we don't damage any of these for the starter, and it should pop right off. So guys, we got that flywheel off of there. It's more of a pain than you guys think. Took a couple good whacks, but it actually came off. And off camera, what we did is we took off the, I would call this, I don't know, I guess a bearing. So we took that off, and when we took the nut off, what you guys will find inside is you're gonna find what's like an oil pressure spring, which this spring here will actually come off, so you're gonna have to go inside, find a way to get it out. I just took like a claw or a grabber and just kind of reached inside, and it slid right on out. Some people take a flathead screwdriver and kind of just back it out or scoot it out, which it's not hard to do. It's not complicated. Came out real easy actually. So now we're gonna take off the front cover here and get that going. So in order to get the front cover off, you have a total of 6 bolts, all 12 millimeter, one here, 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 and here. Actually 7 bolts it looks like. So a total of 7 bolts. Get that off or get those unbolted, and front cover should slide right off. And the front cover is now off. So it was actually 8 bolts. There was one, I actually had a oil feed tube that was still a part of the front cover, so I had to remove that. It's 2 10 millimeter nuts on there to remove it. Then I got back behind here and got this last 12 millimeter bolt, and now she's off. So now next we're going to move on to the oil pump along with the chain here, and that's not good. It's a lot of slack in there, so I can see that this has never been replaced. Guys, if your chain is anywhere loose to this, definitely replace it. It's time for replacement. So now moving on to that. So guys, now that we have the front cover off, what we're going to be doing is taking the oil pump assembly off. We're going to pull this whole front portion off. The oil pump sits right back here. be careful when you're taking this front part off along with the chain. Make sure it all comes off as one. And how we're going to start by doing that is we're going to take this little, I would say, washer right here, pry it back. That way we're able to gain access to this nut. That way we're able to slide everything off, and then we should have access to the counterweight as well as the oil pump itself. So easy peasy in getting that nut off there. What you had to do is you had to take pretty much a small flathead, if you have one, take your rubber mallet and just begin to pry this piece back, this little washer here. And it's a 17mm nut around there. What I did is I had to hold the chain, and it didn't take anything. If you have an electric impact, it'll just come right off. Wasn't too hard at all. So now we're just gonna slide that whole piece out as one, set it to the side, and we'll have access to the oil pump. And just like that, we've gained access to the counterweight as well as the oil pump here. As you can see, I already started to slide the counterweight forward. And you will have this small key lodged in right there. So I would say just take that off with it, or once you slide it completely off. And after that, we're going to take the oil pump off. So I almost forgot, once you do have the counterweight slid off, there's going to be a little small bearing sits behind here. You're just going to pull that off with it as well. Going to be 12mm nuts to take this off. And it's going to be 10mm nuts to take the oil pump off. And there she is. It's the oil pump. Looks nice and clean. I don't see any metal shavings or anything around it. So that's it. Just 4 10mm bolts. Pulls right out. And there she is. So earlier I made the mistake of telling you guys that we were actually going to take this plate out. We're actually not going to be taking this out. I only meant to say that we were going to be taking the oil pump out because this is going to allow us to flip the motor over, go to the back side, and actually start tearing the housings down. So that way we can crack this thing open and take a look at what's inside. So guys, now that we have the motor flipped over, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking these rods out. It's going to be 17mm. Just going to take an electric impact, get them out, and set these to the side. And just like that, we got them all undone. So just go ahead, start pulling them out one by one. These weren't hard at all, guys, at all. And these are reusable. Just going to give them a little cleanup before we do reuse them, because I don't think the last guy that had the car rebuilt the motor at all. I mean, just from what it seems, maybe a few things had a touch up, but I just don't think he actually went inside. Just based on everything that we've encountered thus far with the build. Oop. Alright. And that is it. And then you do have the two here on the sides. Pay attention, there's almost like an M or E marking. I like to say M just for Mazda. There's a marking. Just be aware that this one goes here. The other side does not have it. If you guys can see that. Once again, still both 17mm rods. Just be sure that that one goes on this side, guys. So now that we have all the rods taken out, we're just going to give this a slight tap. And it's up. So after you guys do give that a slight tap, you should be able to pull that rear cover up, and you'll have access into the rear housing. And just like that, guys, out of there. So you might see a couple of your water jacket seals and coolant seals, and actually, I don't know if you guys can see that, but a couple corner seals. And also be aware when you do take this off the back, you will have a Woodrow key that does slide up with it. Some of you may have chose to use a pry bar to get this housing up, or the rear cover up. And that's perfectly fine. Just make sure you don't damage anything along here with the water jackets or damage anything on the side. So yeah, just be careful, guys. And now we take a look inside the motor. So upon pulling the rotor from the rear housing, neat trick that I learned is that these apex seals, they will spring out, guys. They will spring out. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our water jacket, we're going to double it up here, and as we pull up the rotor, what we're going to do is we're going to slide this around the rotor itself, so that way the apex seals hold together. So, little bit of bad news. So I did pull the rotor out of the housing, and everything almost checked out. Everything almost looked good, except for all my rotary guys out there, you know exactly what's missing. There is no second piece for this apex seal. And even, I mean, and if you guys can see it here, you can see a corner actually broke off of that apex seal in the rear housing, and that led to the motor seizing itself. And if you guys can see, we've got some marks inside this housing, some major ones. Especially right there by the exhaust housing, and a little mark here on the side next to where the spark plugs are going. So with that being said, this housing is not reusable. The rotor itself, I was looking at the rotor and I don't see any marks on the rotor. Everything came out fine as far as the seals. The apex seals came out fine. The side seals came out fine. All the clearances seem to be fine. There's, like I said, there's no marks or anything. I mean, it's almost like that apex seal broke and it just shot out the exhaust housing, which is most likely what happened. So maybe we can save this rotor. That housing, definitely we cannot save. That's done for, which I'm pretty disappointed about, just because it's more money to buy housing. However, I know everything's going to be fresh. I don't have to worry. But now we're going to move on to taking that housing off and getting into the front housing and giving that more of an inspection. So let's move on to that and complete the disassembly here. As you guys can see, it wasn't too hard to pull that up there. These are almost like placeholders for your housings, so make sure you keep those, clean those up, make sure you don't damage them. Set them to the side, and yeah, you can definitely see where it's almost like that piece of that apex seal just shot out the exhaust port. I can guarantee you that's what happened, and that's why we lost a little bit of or not lost a little bit, but we lost compression and the motor failed us. So now on to this iron here, the middle iron. And just, I mean, like I said, guys, just inspecting the irons. I mean, the side seals were pretty much flawless. I mean, there's no, I mean, you're going to see those marks there, but I mean, once you get that machine and cleaned up, it's going to look like new. But as long as they're not etching in, I would say, to the iron itself or making any marks, should be all good to go. Should be fine. So yeah, let's get this middle iron removed here. So I was able to get the middle iron off with no issue. I do strongly recommend that you guys have some form of help when doing that, just for the simple fact that, like I mentioned earlier, almost like these placeholders here for the irons could stick on you, and you'll end up yanking on the eccentric shaft, which is, for my piston engine guys, it's like your crankshaft, and we all know that that's something that you guys do not want to damage. So trying my best to put this apex seal back, but it doesn't want to stay in place, so I think I'm gonna just set that to the side. So, but yeah, this is, like I said, that's like your crankshaft there. I'm pretty sure I can yank that on out now. Gonna set that middle iron to the side, get this rotor pulled out, and go from there. So as I mentioned before, for all my piston engine guys, this is like your crankshaft, and I don't see any deep marks or anything like that, just your normal wear and tear from it being rotary. So I'm definitely going to get that cleaned up, and we're definitely going to be able to reuse that. I don't see anything wrong with it. So right now it looks like we're just down one housing. I still have to clean up that rotor, get it inspected, and finish inspecting the front rotor and the front housing, which I don't right now feel any marks or anything like that, but obviously we can't really tell until we get it cracked open. So yeah, we're gonna move on to that, and once we do that, that's gonna complete the disassembly for the 13B here. And then that's where the fun part begins. That's when we start putting things back together. Just got to find a new housing, and once we do that, we'll definitely be in the clear and ready to be able to move on for the assembly. And then I'll let you guys have a sneak peek of what performance parts we have going onto the motor itself. So let's get started on the front housing here. So guys, almost identical thing happened to the front housing, which I'm not happy about at all. So now we're two housings in. Same thing happened with the apex seal on the corner here. It just broke off. We were able to see all three of the second piece of the apex seals with this one. So this one wasn't quite as catastrophic, even on the inside of the housing. The marking, let's see here. The marking is not as deep, if you guys can see it right there. Still, that's not a reusable housing. So now I'm out two housings, and once I do a further inspection upon the rotors here, we're going to be able to see if we can salvage these. To me, they look just fine. But actually not right there. So it almost looks like we're going to be out of a rotor as well. But I definitely got to get these cleaned up just to see, get them inspected, and we'll definitely go from there. So that's gonna be a wrap on the disassembly. I got everything laid out, as you guys can see, from back to front, as far as what needs to be put back on. And I know some of you guys are tripping out, but the front iron is still connected to the engine stand here. I will be cleaning that up, getting that all straightened up as well, so that way we do have everything fresh for the rebuild. And we're also going to get these bearings inside here, and the rear housing, or the rear iron, we're going to get those bearings switched out as well. And yeah, so we're going with a fresh setup. I already have the rebuild kit from Atkins Rotary, and I'm going fresh with everything. I mean, counterweights as well. The only thing that's probably going to be reused, from what I can see here, is the rods, the irons, as well as the eccentric shaft. Everything else is questionable at this point. I know at least the two housings are out, possibly one rotor, and I still got to inspect them just to make sure, but possibly two rotors. So we're looking at almost a brand new setup here. So that's going to be a wrap for today's episode. I'm glad we actually got this thing torn down. We got to inspect everything. Although we did have the two unfortunate mishaps with the apex seals and the housings, that's all a part of being a Rotary owner, guys. And now it's time to rebuild it, put the performance parts on there, actually make this car mine. So I'm looking forward to that. As always, we do thank you guys for watching. Please hit the subscribe button below. Also, give our content a thumbs up. Brian with Briggs Motorsports. I will be seeing you guys next week.